Animal behaviour can be fascinating, and some psychologists spend their entire careers trying to understand why animals act the way they do. Often these psychological findings are then applied to human behaviour. This of course can be useful, as we can conduct studies on animals that simply wouldn't be possible to do on humans. But as you can imagine, this animal research can be problematic, both ethically and considering the very different mental experiences of animals and humans. Regarding attachment, there are two researchers whose work with animals has been very influential: Konrad Lorenz's work on grey-lag geese and Henry Harlow's work on rhesus macaques. So let's look at what they found and discuss if we can apply their findings to human attachment. The PsychBoost flashcard app has a new feature. Test yourself with over 1,500 multiple choice questions, including every topic on A-level or GCSE psychology. Try paper 1 for free right now. And Patreon supporters can watch PsychBoost videos ad-free, learn from over 17 hours of exclusive exam tutorial videos, and access hundreds of digital and printable resources, including mind maps, quiz sheets, worksheets, teaching slides, and more. Animal Studies of Attachment. Lorenz. This is Lorenz. He investigated imprinting, and you've likely seen the results of imprinting whenever you've seen young ducklings following their mother around a pond. This behaviour is common in birds, and Lorenz decided to test what made animals imprint. To test imprinting, he randomly divided a clutch of grey-lag goose eggs. Half he left to hatch naturally with a biological mother, and the other half he hatched in an incubator, making sure that he was the first thing the goslings he hatched saw. In some later studies, he tested the limits of imprinting by making the goslings wait before seeing any moving object. Lorenz found the goslings hatched by their mother followed her, and the goslings he hatched imprinted on him, following him closely. When Lorenz mixed all of the goslings in a box and the box was lifted, the goslings who were imprinted on him ran to him, and the goslings who had imprinted on the mother goose ran to her. He also found there was a limit to how long a gosling could go without imprinting before losing the ability, around 32 hours. He termed this the critical period. If the goslings hadn't been able to imprint by this point, they lost the ability. Lorenz's work provides evidence for a biological aspect to attachment behaviour in birds, and that the process of imprinting is based on vision. Animal Studies of Attachment. Harlow. This researcher is Harlow. His experiment tested the cupboard love theory of attachment. Based on learning theory, cupboard love suggests that infants love their mothers because they feed them. This is because the infants form an association between food and the mother. The third attachment video will discuss the theory in more detail. Harlow removed infant monkeys from their mother soon after birth and placed them in a cage. In the cage were two surrogate mothers, one made of wire with a bottle filled with milk, and one a cloth mother that didn't provide food but did provide comfort. The time the monkeys spent with each surrogate mother was carefully recorded. Harlow also frightened the infant monkeys with a mechanical monkey to see which surrogate mother they would run towards. Yeah, it was a pretty horrible experiment. Harlow found the monkeys spent the majority of their time with the cloth mother, not the wire mother. They visited the wire mother, but just to feed. After they'd fed, they returned to the cloth mother. When Harlow frightened the monkeys, they ran to the cloth mother. The monkeys in Harlow's studies suffered maternal deprivation, a term we'll discuss in more detail in the fifth attachment video. In later follow-up research, Harlow found the monkeys he experimented on had long-term problems interacting with other monkeys and raising their infants. From these findings, Harlow rejected the cupboard love theory, as the monkeys had not attached to the wire mother with the food at all. Instead, Harlow argued that animals like the macaques in his study have an innate need for physical contact. Evaluations. As Lorenz and Harlow's research was on animal models, we should first consider whether it's valid to apply these findings to humans. Animals and humans are very different. Biologically, we have more complex brain structure than most animals, and our society and culture influence our behaviour. Animals are thought to act more on instinct, while humans plan their actions over the long term. Higher order primates like Harlow's macaques are the closest animals genetically to humans, but they are still very different from humans, so findings on their behaviour should only be applied to humans very carefully. Despite these concerns, researchers have considered whether there are lessons to be learned about human behaviour from these animal studies. One researcher who used these findings and his theories is John Bowlby, a researcher we returned to multiple times in this attachment unit. Bowlby argued that, similar to the macaques in Harlow's research, human infants crave comfort from their mothers, attempting to form what he termed a monotrophic relationship. If human infants fail to develop this bond due to maternal deprivation, Bowlby argued that humans would have poor social abilities, similar to the monkeys. Bowlby also claimed, like the Goslings in Lorenz's study, human infants have a critical period in which they need to form an attachment. Bowlby argued for humans this was from 6 to 30 months. After this point, the damage would be irreversible. However, while it's true that goslings have a critical period, later research looking at deprived human orphans, who later received suitable care, showed recovery, indicating humans have a sensitive, not a critical period. As knowledge gained from Harlow and Lorenz's work was developed by Bowlby, and so ultimately informed childcare practice, we can argue these practical applications can be traced back to Harlow and Lorenz's work. As examples, knowledge of imprinting is linked to why midwives encourage immediate physical contact between the mother and their babies. And seeing the poor outcomes of deprived infant macaques is part of the reason social service workers are so active in investigating cases of infant neglect, understanding the potential for long-term harm. Finally, the evaluation I imagine many of you expected to see. Harlow's research was unethical. His subjects were primates and clearly experienced suffering from being removed from their mothers and being subjected to stressful situations. As well as causing harm to the animals, this type of research harms psychology's reputation with the general public. While both of these things are true, Harlow's work did influence later researchers like Bowlby, ultimately leading to an understanding of the importance of early attachment that has changed policies around infant care. These policies have improved the lives of millions of infants. Taking a cost-benefit perspective, some people would argue that Harlow's research was justified. Before we finish, I need to make a quick general point about ethical evaluations. While they are effective evaluations in the right essay, keep in mind if a study is unethical, as much as we might not like it, this doesn't actually tell us if the data collected is valid or not. So in this case, if a question asks what Harlow's research tells us about human behaviour, talking about Harlow's work being unethical isn't going to answer that question. Keep this in mind for other famously unethical studies in psychology. I want to thank everyone over on Patreon for supporting the channel. Because of you, I've been able to teach part-time, meaning I can make Psych Boost on YouTube for everyone. And a special thank you to Kat Posnick and Ahmed Romani for supporting at the developer level. I do have extra resources that are exclusive to my patrons, so if you decide to sign up, you can grab those over my website. And these include over 100 exam question tutorial videos, of course including questions on the attachment unit. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next Psych Boost video.